Welcome to another episode. Together with Dayu and myself, Simon, we are the EcommOps podcast. And we try to be a thought leader in the China fulfillment space, making sure that global D2C brands are scaling globally in the best capacity. Welcome to another episode, Dayu.
Thank you, Simon. And today we're going to try out a slightly different format. We're constantly getting very good questions from our clients. We're constantly hearing about new updates in the entire industry. And we wanted to try a format where, let's call it a state of e-commerce operations, where Simon and myself occasionally will do more of a fireside chat kind of style where we take turns talking about some of the key topics that we see in the industry, that we have some of our bigger clients asking us, and providing that kind of insight in quicker, slightly shorter formats as opposed to planning for an entire video or podcast recording, just to get those insights out to our audience as fast as possible. All right, so let's test this out. So Simon, why don't you go? So what's been top of your mind or top of our clients' mind recently?
Yes, indeed, Dayu. We've been all these events all over the world, and different events when it comes to affiliates. We talk with brand owners. We've been to logistics events as well. So what is now for you then really top of mind?
Yeah, so one of the things that I've actually been dealing with quite recently is localization of packaging. This is a conversation that we've had with many of our previous clients, existing clients as well. As brands start to sell more globally, there is just more concerns around, well, what do you actually need to do to comply with local regulations? Now, there is a lot of regulations that you should be considering. I mean, there's stuff like taxes and duties and things like that. We've been talking a lot about like tariffs and VAT in our past podcast videos. One specific regulation that a lot of really rightfully top of mind is when you sell to a different country than your local target. So let's just say that you're a US brand and selling to the US. Now, what do you actually do if you want to actually enter the European or the Asian markets? The right way to do things is ideal. However, there is many times a imperfect but good enough way. As opposed to, you might think that, hey, I want to enter in 5 more markets, and one of them is German, one of them speaks, it could be Asia, it could be Italy, whatever. We've had clients ask us, well, that seems complicated to figure out. Do we need different language packages for each of these locales, which then creates a lot of complications around it? And I actually have a very tangible experience doing this. I am working with a Thai skincare brand, and we've been launching a body scrub to global markets. Now, that was always the plan ahead, and we had the understanding that by different regulatory regulations, the FDA or the equivalent in different countries, you have to do a couple of things. One, make sure that your product itself is tested to be safe to be sold in these various countries. So that's the formulation itself. So that's something that actually we already work with our factory to make sure that it's actually safe and approved for sale in all these countries. Now, we spent a lot of time on thinking about the packaging design because this is a product that was also sold locally in Thailand. And then we want to have like some Thai branding as well. So in order to make things what we thought was more efficient was because we wanted to use the same packaging to sell in the US and globally and also in Thailand as well, is that at least for the US and Thailand, we decided to have both languages on the package itself. Directions, ingredients, how to use and everything like that. And as you can imagine, it got really cluttered and like there was not a lot of real estate. And it looked fine. I mean, the branding was great, but that in itself probably caused a little bit of negative perception that it's not like Americans don't see all English and Thai don't see all Thai, for example. So that was the approach that we made, and it was a compromise. And we realize now it was unnecessary. Because what we learned really recently, actually, in the Thai and many Asian markets, all you actually really need is like a sticker. It could be like a white, like aftermarket sticker that has like the product name and like a description in the product. Because for most of these markets, it's kind of assumed that the ingredients, like even in English, is fine because those are the legal ingredients, right? And all the other details on the package itself might be more marketing messaging, and that's not necessary to be translated. And at first, I thought, okay, from a brand point of view, a sticker looks ugly, right? Like, I mean, literally, it would be like a white sticker over a nice package, right? What we realized is that, especially if your original text is like English or a European language, actually that has higher perceived value than even having Thai on your package, because they think this is an imported product. This is like an American product. And in a way, having like a really ugly sticker actually increases the perceived value because it's not locally produced.
What is on the sticker then?
Product name, product description, manufacturing date, expiry date, and like the FDA lot number. That's literally all you need, because it's assumed that everything else, I mean, particularly the ingredients, right? It's assumed that the English ingredients are okay, right? And now this is going to differ depending on different country. So some countries are going to require you to have maybe like, if you use a sticker, it's going to have like, you do have to translate some more, and that's going to be depending on the country itself, right? But my point is, especially in regards to like more smaller, mid-sized e-commerce sellers trying to scale to a different country, don't worry so much about your packaging. Don't try to localize your packaging every single time you enter a new market. If you're a US-based brand and your angle is like, hey, this is an American product, it's completely fine to have English on your product. People are used to that. Now, you might have to add some additional instructions, an insert or sticker, depending on the local regulatory requirements. But that's way simpler and way more flexible than having to develop a separate new package with a different MOQ for that as well. On the other hand, Americans do care a little bit more about packaging, but still, on the other hand, hey, this is a international brand, or actually, Korean brands. So Korean skincare is very big around the world. And Americans are fine with buying a clearly Korean brand or Japanese brand, and it has like a lot of Korean on it, because that's part of the angle as well. And it all depends on the angle, right? So my point here is that this was a great learning lesson for me in terms of the efficient way to enter a new international market. And the less that you have to localize, the better it is. So that like, you're not creating like 2, 3, 4 different types of box designs just to enter into a new market, where especially if your angle is your original country of development anyway, so having more English is totally fine to just quickly ramp up in different markets.
But actually, it might have more value, especially when you have online sales, right? Then everything you can write online already. And in the confirmation email, you can even have instructions on how to use it. Because most of the time you open your products from the product packaging, you throw the product packaging away and you start using the product and like, oh, let's check the instructions. And that might be online in your own language that has been sent to you by email. It's very common as well in China. In China, you do need the ingredients also translated into Chinese, but it was always a sticker on the product itself, especially when it came to like milk powder from certain countries, Australia, Netherlands, Germany, or Ireland. They were perceived as a higher value when it was the original packaging and not the translated packaging for the domestic market you can buy in the supermarket. It's about perceived value. That one is real. The other one is somebody touched it before it went to market. That's kind of the perception. So if you have a Thai brand or Korean brand with the original text on it and you get educated online about what the product does, that makes completely sense from any experience. Yeah. That's pretty cool.
No, exactly. And actually this highlights one important point around, you should have some initial hypotheses, basic assumptions around your customer base. But especially if your target customer base is a new audience that you're not actually used to marketing to, also take the care to not overly assume things, especially things that are actually going to fundamentally increase difficulty or complexity for you to enter in that market. I mean, that was a perfect example that I just used. Like, I incorrectly assumed that customers are not going to like a ugly sticker on a premium brand. And actually, it was wrong. I was proven wrong. And because of that, we actually incurred a lot more cost and complexity in terms of our packaging design than if we just kind of develop it in English and just added a Thai sticker to it.
Talking about going global and cross-border, one of the key things that we really see this year is this hybrid fulfillment concept. And it's been pretty fascinating to see, because we've been probably saying this. One of our first episodes this year was called hybrid fulfillment. And we've kind of been preaching it already, but then we see it actually happening where marketplaces are going into this hybrid fulfillment model where Shein and Temu are localizing with products that are difficult to ship from China, or they want to have best-selling products locally available. But now Amazon and also Walmart announced that they're going to ship directly from China. And then it's more a question, okay, how do I find the right mix? And not just the marketplaces are doing it. And in Europe, there's a bunch of marketplaces that should be considering it as well, I guess. But it will be a very big game changer, because then it's no longer about I'm excelling in domestic delivery or I excel in shipping from China. It's going to be what is the best mix, the optimal mix. And for a brand owner, that means also that you have to navigate that and you have to compete with that. That is for conversations that are now currently day to day for us with our clients, because the way they've been structured has worked, but the way to be ready for the future, there might be some tweaks. And now is also, when it comes to when the peak season is just behind us, then it's actually also very important that during certain times of the year, peak season, Chinese New Year, that's in other periods of time, that you can leverage and continue selling so that you don't miss out. And that's the whole point of hybrid fulfillment, but also China fulfillment. You don't have to miss out. If you structure your business appropriately with stock and inventory in multiple locations or a single location, you can plan for it and avoid missing out and just continue leveraging. These conversations have been so real, but that brings complexity, I guess, as well, because you have multiple locations, you have multiple flows, you have multiple data flows, and you have also multiple sales channels probably as well that come with it, because it might be connected differently as well. That complexity is definitely something that we've been brainstorming a lot about this year, Dayu, myself, and with other players in our industry as well, of how do we solve hybrid fulfillment, not just opening a warehouse, because that's relatively easy, or finding a partner warehouse, but how do you integrate that in a way that you can build it automatically without worrying, without Excel sheets and copy pasting things together. And that's kind of like, I would say, a very big chapter for 2025, and something that we're really trying to crack as well with the network that we built over the years. And I know you have ideas as well, really cool examples, Dayu itself, where it shows that the current model has cracks when it comes to bringing these hybrid fulfillment into practice.
So my thought on hybrid fulfillment, or this whole concept of having multiple locations in different countries, usually China and a local fulfillment center, is that it's really the option going forward for any kind of scaling type of business. And I'm saying this with some bias because literally I run EcommOps, which is China fulfillment. But from a pure supply chain strategy standpoint, the hybrid fulfillment is the most ideal. And right now, it's not about as simple as stuff like where your fulfillment is based, location, right? If you think about it on a high level, what you're trying to optimize for is your customer experience, balancing it with your business needs. So for your customers, and especially these days, they're more used to buying from Temu, from brands that actually ship from China. There's not as much negativity around that. And they care about getting the right product at high quality in the time frame that they expected, regardless of where it's from. Now, don't say it's going to take 2 days. It's going to take 5 days from China, right? But it's the customer experience that they actually really care about, achieving the expectations that you set out. On the other hand, balancing up with your brand's business needs. Your ability to actually fulfill from China gives you an incredible amount of flexibility and agility. And if you do it in the right way, we've seen it 10 times. 10x reducing your inventory risk, 10x launching new products faster, 10x more actively reacting to demand changes in different countries as well, and be able to actually access a lot more countries than a local US fulfillment center can reasonably access as well. So hybrid fulfillment is not just a cost efficiency optimization tool, it could actually completely change how you think about your entire supply chain. It is here to stay. And in more and more, the biggest brands in the world are actually actively figuring out how to include hybrid fulfillment options, particularly from China, into their supply chain strategy. And we know this because a lot of them are actually talking to us in order to set it up correctly. Now, the theory of hybrid fulfillment makes a lot of sense. However, when you actually operationalize it, it does create some extra complexity, given multiple locations and multiple channels. So Simon, I mean, this is something that from our clients recently, we've had a few examples of them actually facing some of these complex considerations that are all addressable, by the way, if you think about it the right way. So Simon, maybe you can kind of give some examples of what we've seen from our clients.
Yeah, so when it comes to this multiple warehouses keeping similar inventory, sometimes the same or similar complementary inventory, it becomes very tricky. Let's take the example. You have two warehouses, one in the US, one in China. Then you're getting an order from Europe. Where are you going to fulfill that from? Which one makes most sense? Then that order might consist of two pieces. One piece is in the US, one is in China, or both are in China and one is in the US. How are you going to make that logic work? And for example, you run out of an inventory. Maybe one of the items is just sold out and then you're going to have to ship it or still on the way. What are you going to do then until that product is not arriving in the warehouse in the US? Are you going to say, sorry, it's not there, we're not going to ship it, we're only going to ship one item? Or you're going to split it. You're going to make two parcels out of it and ship them separately, one from China, one from that. How are you going to communicate that to your customers? But also, how do you plan for that? How do you keep track of it? Because then when you have multiple locations, and this is just two locations, we're working with clients that have 17 warehouses across the globe. If you're going to do that at scale, having multiple warehouse locations, because if you want to do US fulfillment really well, you need actually 3 locations, somewhere in the east, in the middle, and the west. And that also applies for Europe. If you want to do it well, you need multiple locations. Shipping from Germany to Sweden is maybe okay-ish, but it's not great if your core market is Sweden or Scandinavia, or to Spain or Italy. So having multiple warehouse locations becomes complex. Let's say you have these 3 warehouses in the US and one is running out of inventory. Which of the other 2 are you going to use to ship it out from? Having that logic in place that is no longer a manual process that somebody has to click and decide where am I going to fulfill what order from at scale when you're doing 1,000 orders a day is not as easy as it looks. A warehouse is sometimes typically seen as, you have the inventory, you just have to grab the product, put it in a parcel or a bag, put a label on it and ship it out. Yeah, but if the product is not there, but in a different facility, then what?
At the core of it is data. And how do you get the right data and make the right decisions with data? So there's been a lot of advancements in AI and automation, and there can be sometimes a misconception that AI is going to solve all of this decision making. It's not. We've had clients ask us, oh, can we just use Shopify or whatever ready-made platform? They seem to have this location feature. Can we just use them and use EcommOps system to then automate some of these decision makings? Like when do we ship from the US versus Europe versus China? And the answer is no. So our biggest clients, they build their own custom systems and have their own internal logic in order to make those kind of decisions. And even them, they're going to have a lot of manual interactions into their system as well. But if you don't have that, if you don't have your own custom ERP system, you need something. You need something to actually understand your physical inventory. And if you have to, make some manual decisions based on that, particularly if you have multiple locations. So let's simplify the problem. Let's just say there's one US location and there's one China location. And to even make it simpler, let's just say you just have like one product SKU. So it's really a difference between, okay, when you ship from the US, when you ship from China. But even that becomes complicated. Because maybe in the hybrid fulfillment model, you're using sea freight to optimize your average cost. So you're constantly kind of waiting for a container to arrive in your US fulfillment. But when do you actually swap to US fulfillment? When the inventory is there? And then when do you how do you go the other way around? So in the case of, okay, maybe it's a holiday season and you're selling out, then how do we actually make sure that you swap effectively to another fulfillment center, assuming they have stock? And how do you even know they have stock in the first place, right? So it all gets complicated, and it has to do with data. And one key point is, if you're using Shopify or some ready-made platform, do not depend on your storefront data for inventory planning. That is the biggest mistake that I see a lot of people do, either using Shopify or some kind of Shopify app. There's Inventory Planner, for example. That's an app that some people use. The problem with that is that that's based on sales data. And sales data is almost never exactly the same as your physical count. There might be some returns in your physical count, for example. Maybe there's some damages, right? And if you keep using your sales data as a source of truth, it's going to be more and more inaccurate as you go through time. right? And then a lot of our clients are asking as well, why can't you guys just connect your order data to the sales data? That's not feasible either, because for any warehouse WMS system that is optimal, every piece of data for us is organized by the parcel, not by the Shopify order. And that's actually very important. So for example, there's going to be some larger orders we have to ship in split packages because there's limits of weight and volume in each parcel from China. So one order might actually create two line items, two parcels. And if you don't know that, then it's going to be inaccurate mapping it up. On the other hand, especially for clients out there who utilize creative upsells, particularly post-purchase upsells, or actually even if a customer purchases twice in the same, like in a 10-minute period, our system logically, to save our clients money, merge those two orders together so that it creates one parcel. So another example of, unless you actually know the difference between parcel level data and order level data, then it's not going to be accurate enough. Now, if you know that, then you should be aware of the data coming in from both platforms, and hopefully you have some way of using Google Sheets, whatever, to be able to kind of parse that data. So that's very, very one important disconnect. And now to the question of how do you actually track physical inventory? Again, have your own source of truth. Don't depend on Shopify data or your storefront data because that's based on sales. It's not physical. Okay. Don't also just trust your warehouse either. I mean, look, I like to think that we're very trustworthy, but still, like, you trust your own source of truth. Gather this data, understand how it actually works, and then collect it together and create your own source of truth and make sure that it's audited and matched up. And if there's any discrepancies, talk with your warehouse and like figure out why. There might be like returns, for example, or maybe it's missing a batch, for example. Right now, any more mature warehouse, and this is something that whether it's your China fulfillment center or your US fulfillment center, make sure they do this. Is so for EcommOps, we make sure that every single inventory movement is tracked in our system, regardless if you ask for it. So even if we say that we move this one unit across the hallway because of more efficient fulfillment, that's tracked. That one unit is actually tracked. So that's how we actually remain a level of confidence that our physical count is accurate. Because if there is some discrepancy, we literally have a log of where that inventory ended up, and it obviously wouldn't disappear, right? So you make sure that you do that to have confidence in your warehouse's inventory management system. And then usually our clients, through the third-party platform or analysis tool, they're developing direct APIs with our system as well, so that you can actually pull the actual physical inventory numbers. There is a caveat there, though, is that depending on how you pull the data, it's also not going to match up with your order data as well, because your order data is coming in, like just throughout the day, throughout the evening. And then if you're pulling a snapshot of, well, this is my physical inventory at this point in time, then your orders are still coming in. So they're still getting allocated for pending orders as well. So just keep that in mind. So we actually have individual data that can update to the order. So I think the most ideal technical way to do this is that every single time that you query an order from our system, you get the direct inventory count from that. But most front-end systems can't deal with that. But another way to deal with it is to remember, depending on your time zone, that China fulfillment has hours where there's no fulfillment happening. And then if you time your inventory pull, let's just say after the end of day, China, then you're going to have a much more accurate view of this is literally the physical inventory of that day in the fulfillment center, because nothing was going through the evening anyways. So anyways, a lot of super technical things, but hopefully I described it in a more simple way, because just understanding some of these nuances is already a very important factor in understanding how to think about your inventory data and then how to make decisions based on it.
Yeah, that's very insightful, Dayu, because these are real conversations that we're having with clients. And if you haven't visited a warehouse, please do so, because it will definitely help. We've had our clients come visiting our warehouse again. It's great because they actually can see when you talk about making a comparison about order level and parcel level is a huge distinction. And it's hard sometimes to see when every day you click on your Shopify to check how many orders came in. It doesn't show how many parcels it's been sent out for. So it's also a number that you cannot resonate with because nobody's telling you that you should see the data not as, from a logistics perspective, not an order, but on a parcel. And then you already realize, oh, there is a discrepancy because I cannot do 1 + 1 is 2 because there might not be a 2. There's just still one single order. That brings complexity, but these are the conversations that we're having. And also with our system, it's it's amazing to be able to really go all the way to the unit level and where it is the item is, but also the parcel, where it is, so that we can actually identify where in our process as well it needs to be more optimized. Because obviously nothing is perfect, but it's a continuous optimization of running fulfillment warehouse at scale. Not a storage location, but a fulfillment location. And this is something that really differentiates EcommOps from most of the fulfillment locations that technically are more have a fulfillment corner and then filled up with storage space, where actually for us it's continuously rotating inbound, outbound, and the inbounding of inventory, preparing it to make sure that we have sufficient stock for the day, for the week, or for the coming days, and just do it over and over. And that requires optimization. We're not talking about pallet loads. We're talking about shelf spaces that are organically developing throughout the day and transforming into a new shelf space for some other product because that shelf space may have become available. It's not an easy task, but that's something that we've been built for over the years and serve our clients that way and make it look like it's smooth operations. But there's a lot of technicalities to it.
So that actually brings up a great point, because we actually had some clients visiting in the last couple of months, and actually it was Alex Fedotov who actually asked a very smart question around our warehouses are not high ceiling warehouses. And he was saying, oh, he's visited some US warehouses and factories. They're all extremely high ceiling. Everything is stacked up super high, and forklifts and everything like that. And he was like, well, that seems like it will hold more stuff. And technically it does, but that's to Simon's point around the difference between a warehouse that's optimized for fulfillment operations versus long-term storage. For long-term storage, you build up high, especially in the US as well, because space is expensive in terms of square footage. So the best way to reduce your costs for long-term storage is build up. And because it's long-term storage, you're not really moving those products very often, maybe months, maybe a year later, which means that it does actually make sense to build up and use forklifts for moving into, usually it's called fulfillment or staging areas for more of that high volume type of fulfillment. Now, all of our warehouses are actually low ceiling or regular ceiling, and we don't require any forklifts at all. Someone could actually just lift the top package, the top carton without any kind of equipment. There's a couple of benefits of that. One is just safety in general. Like when you don't have to use forklifts and create hazards, always better, right? The best way to minimize safety concerns is to avoid them in the first place, right? So heavy machinery is actually not a positive in warehouses, and also just efficiency. We're moving so much volume. I mean, right now we're moving 20, 25, 30,000 orders per day. And sometimes like our clients spike up like all of a sudden to 1,000 orders per day from a few hundred. So whatever we had planned for in terms of getting out of long-term storage goes out the window, and like, okay, like after lunch, okay, shoot, we have to get 500 more units of the same product. So as opposed to planning for any kind of significant inventory move and machinery and transfers, like literally we just have our team like, okay, like get a dolly and just get a bunch of cartons and it'll be in our fulfillment area in like 20 minutes. There's actually, and please come visit any of our big clients or potential clients, come check it out. I think there's a lot of surprises that you will actually see, and visit your warehouses as well. Also think logically about what actually makes sense. Just having high ceilings doesn't make it a better warehouse. And the other thing, by the way, is automation. So a lot of folks, like they kind of imagine our warehouse to have like a lot of robotics, assembly lines, and things like that. So for example, Amazon FBA has that. Amazon FBA has a ton of automation robotics, but you know why? It's because two things. One, they have tons of SKUs they have to manage. On an average SKU basis, like they don't fulfill that much of an average SKU as opposed to what we do, right? And also they're a closed box system. Everything goes into Amazon FBA, and there's a lot of data and automation around that. However, for a normal fulfillment operation, so one, we only really deal with high volume clients. It's actually way more efficient to just literally get your products, one SKU at a time and get it sorted and just pack it on a table. It's by far faster than any kind of robotics and more accurate as well, because you have the human element of gut checking. Hey, is this even the right color, the right product? And then in terms of like having a closed system, like so FBA is great and efficient, but this is also why if you use Amazon FBA, sometimes it takes like 1 week, 2 weeks to actually onboard your product into the system, because it has to go into the system first. Whereas the benefit of what we do without all of that required automation is that we can just onboard a SKU like 5,000 units of it, and if needed, we can just start fulfilling it that afternoon. because we just barcode it and just get into the process without like all of that setup needed to ensure efficient automation of the fulfillment.
This was all for this episode, a little bit different than normal, more a little bit of a chit chat, but we went pretty deep. We went all about actually the data components, how to perceive order from a parcel, but also the hybrid component being regulated on your packaging when you scale globally. So there's been a lot of topics passed by that we could have done in a whole episode technically, but we just decided to just give you some sound bites and give you some understanding of really in-depth of what fulfillment really is all about when you do this in a cross-border and global scale. Let me know what your biggest takeaway is. Really eager to learn. If you think we should spend more time on one of these topics, also let us know. We're very deeply interested in it. We can talk for hours if you want to. So if you give us a stage, we will talk about this for sure in depth. Thank you for listening and catch you on the next episode.